Hello and welcome back to another Save It for Parts vintage tech review. Today we've got a briefcase. It's not just any briefcase, this is actually one of the world's first portable computers, the Osborne 1. The Osborne 1 came out in April of 1981 and was advertised as being the first portable computer that fit underneath an airplane seat, so you could bring this as carry-on luggage. I guess airplane seats back in those days had something called leg room and comfort. These days, I don't think you'd be getting this anywhere near the seat in front of you. This actually predates DOS and uses an operating system called CP/M. It was only around for a few years. It was discontinued in 1983. It was kind of a victim of its own success. It was so popular that the company came out with two follow-on models, and they kind of started advertising those before they existed. So people stopped buying the Osborne 1, waiting for the successor, the Executive, and then the Vixen to come out. And so the company stopped making money, and they weren't able to actually successfully release the Executive and the Vixen in enough numbers to really turn a profit. So Osborne folded, and nobody ever heard of them again. This also suffered from competition from early IBM PCs and then other CP/M portables like the K-Pro 2 computer. Mr. Donnie here is eager to help with all of my videos. The Osborne here sports a whopping 4 MHz Z80 processor and 64K of RAM. You could also get an external monitor if you got tired of the little tiny 5-inch screen in the middle. Now apparently this was mainly successful at first, not just because of its portable nature, but because it came with so much software. The thing apparently shipped with almost $1,000 worth of software, and it only cost a little more than $1,000. So some writers at the time claimed that you were buying the software and getting the Osborne 1 essentially for free. While the Osborne was referred to as a portable computer, and some people have called it the world's first laptop, it's really a stretch to call it a laptop, especially when much more portable computers like the Tandy Radio Shack series came out in the early 1980s as well. These have also been called the world's first laptop. I've got another video on some of these guys if you want to check that out. This would more accurately be called a luggable. You can fold it up, you can lug it around. You're not really going to be using it on your lap. You're not really going to be using it away from city power, although apparently there was a battery pack option, which made it even more heavy and likely to completely crush your lower body if you tried to use it on your lap. Almost everything you want is on the front here. The disk drives, the screen, all of the ports. I wish more computers went this way instead of hiding all the ports at the back. I think this is a lot cooler. You've also got these storage slots where you can put your floppy disks, and yeah, this is actually a mini floppy disk. So these are the old 5.5 inch, which were small compared to the earlier 8-inch floppies. So you've got two drives here, so you can have your operating system disk in one, you can have a file disk or games or something else on the other one. We have a 9-pin modem port, we have a 25-pin serial port, which was the style at the time. We've got our keyboard connector. This little thing here that says do not remove while power is on, this is basically a jumper for the screen. So the video signal from inside the computer, from the motherboard, comes up to this spot. With the plug in place, it gets routed back into the 5-inch screen here. If we pulled this plug off, I believe we can hook up an external monitor, and supposedly the actual video window on this, the actual desktop, is bigger than the little screen. So an external monitor, you could see your entire desktop. On the little bitty one here, you just see part of the desktop. So when you're doing word processing or something, you can type and it'll just go off the screen here because it's going to the bigger video display. We have another DB9 over here. This is for the battery. Big chunky reset button. This is great. Old computers, they knew you'd have to reset that pretty frequently, so there is a big old button for that. No little tiny hidden reset for the Osborne. While most of the ports are on the front, we do have a couple things on the back. This little cover slides out and is actually an air vent, so that's just to let heat out of the case. These CRT screens and these old motherboards generate a lot of heat, so that's just a vent. And then we have our power input over here. You can see we've got our AC plug, some fuses, and the power switch. Now usually when I get an old piece of tech like this, I plug it in, turn it on, and see what happens. However, with the Osborne 1, I've heard there are a couple major issues that 99% of these units have. First off, there are 3 capacitors on the power board which are very well known for exploding. I'm going to open it up and at least look at those capacitors, see if they've been replaced. If not, I'm going to order some new ones. They're not too expensive. They're like $10 on eBay. The other main issue with these is the drive motors. So these drives actually needed to be lubricated. So they need a little bit of oil on some stepper motors, maybe some grease on belts. That is another very common issue with these things that prevents them from booting. And I'd like to just do some of that maintenance stuff before we even turn it on, just to minimize any damage to the discs, minimize any damage to the unit itself, and have the best chance of success. Now, there are other common problems with Osbornes. The CPU can go out, the RAM can go out. There are a bunch of components that may or may not be flaky in here. I'm hoping that this one is still good. It's right in the middle of their production years. This is 1982. They were around from 81 to 83, so I'm hoping that one made right in the middle of that time is less likely to have some of the early teething issues and less likely to have some of the later issues when the company was going bankrupt. Another nice thing about these old computers, all the screws are right on the front. Remember when technology had accessible screws that you were meant to take off that used a regular driver bit? Yeah, crazy, I know. Now I should mention, don't try this at home. On old computers like this, especially anything with a CRT or big capacitors, there's things in here that can actually kill you. So the CRT can hold a charge, the capacitors can hold a charge. Even with it long turned off, even with everything apparently dead, you can zap the heck out of yourself. So I'm experienced with junk like this, but I would not recommend that anyone just open up their old computers and start poking around in there. Okay, here's our power supply board. It's actually on the other side. This screw here is actually stuck to the riser underneath, so we might have to grab that with some pliers. Alright, so here is our power supply board. So this power supply subassembly is from 1980, made by Aztec Components. So this was probably just an off-the-shelf power supply for something else that Osborne took and put in here. These are the three capacitors that we're worried about. So this is the main one that likes to blow up. Sometimes these other guys like to blow up. These other capacitors all look fine. They're a little bit of a different design. They're less likely to outright explode, although sometimes they will leak. I don't see any sign of that in here, so I'll probably leave these barrel capacitors alone. I'm honestly a little conflicted here. These capacitors don't look damaged yet. I know it's not supposed to hurt the unit. If these actually blow, it's not a big deal. We can just replace them. I'd like to fire this up and play with it, but again, it's going to be at risk of fireworks and smoke. If and when they blow out, we'll have the replacements ready. We can open it up again and solder those in. While we're in here, we can look at the motherboard. Pretty straightforward for a computer this era. CPU, memory. This is the disk controller board. While I've got the thing open, I might as well take the disk drives out and see if those need any lubrication. So on this drive, at least, the belt looks fine, and the little stepper motor here looks fine. Both the cats seem to be really interested in this computer. They are just very, very helpful. They're always helpful with projects like this, but even more so with this thing. Same over here, everything looks pretty good with this drive. There was a little bit of squeaking from this pulley, so I gave it a little bit of oil. We've even solved some computer bugs. We've got several dead insects and parts of insects that came out of here when we opened it up. I have to admit, I'm still a little nervous about using all these flimsy plastic latches and the little feet and everything. This guy is in great condition, and I would hate to break something off from plastic fatigue. So when you set it up on the keyboard, it does have places for those little clips on the keyboard to go. Okay, I did order new capacitors for this, and I was going to wait to power it on until they came, but everything is in such good condition, I kind of want to risk it. It almost looks like it has not been used since the 1980s. Those three capacitors in the back look physically okay. I know that means nothing, but I'm willing to give it a shot here. I'm willing to turn it on, see if the magic blue smoke escapes. If it does, well, we've got new capacitors on the way, and supposedly it doesn't detrimentally affect the computer at all. All right, here goes. If I screw with the brightness and contrast, it's got all these weird lines on the screen, but I think that's very common with this model of computer. So, yeah, it actually did fire up. I was fooled because there are no cooling fans. There are really no moving parts other than the disk drives. So you can't really tell when it's on if your brightness is down. We're going to give it disk 1, the CP/M backup copy. I don't have the original copy. This is just what came with the computer. I think that's in place. We hit return. Listen to that drive spin. All right, and it is saying we have a bad sector on the disk. Now, that could be an actual bad sector. It could mean that our disk drive is dirty. We did not clean the heads. I thought about it later. I should have taken these drives apart farther and put some isopropyl alcohol on the actual read heads. I might be able to get a cleaning disc and do that later, but I'm not sure if that is the issue or not. We're going to try booting from the other drive, B, and we can switch those by typing Shift and quote mark here. That's making a few different noises, so hey, it's working. So the A drive has an issue. B drive seems like it's running. I guess I should say that is now the A drive because doing that Shift quote swaps the two, so I'll have to remember when it asks for disks, this is now assigned to A and this is B. So here we go, CP/M, Osborne 1 computer, initial help menu, common things you might do with this. So if we go to A, it tells us about the interpreter. We've got how to run stuff in CBasic. This is actually really cool that it has all of the basic info on the machine that just pops up immediately. Like you don't have to have a paper manual, which is great because this doesn't come with one. You don't have to pull up a help file. It just pushes you straight into the help file. So this was great back in the days when nobody had used a computer before, and yeah, everybody's going to need to know this stuff. These days, you get a new computer, you might get a manual, nobody ever reads one. It actually gives you the breakdown of how the memory is laid out. So we've got video RAM, BIOS, CP/M. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, let's see what self-portrait is. Z. Oh, that's cool. It gives you a little picture of the Osborne 1. So it labels all the parts. And it definitely warns you, don't press reset if you're not sure why you're doing it. It's very similar to early DOS, although there are a few little differences that might screw me up while I'm playing around with it. But let's go ahead and exit out to CP/M, see if we can load anything else. Let's just see what else is on the disk here. Not too much. We've got our auto start, our help, setup. We've got pip, which I think is a copying utility. Let's see what's on disk 2. So that's got MBasic and CBasic. Disk 3 does not want to run on the B drive. So this one should have been WordStar, but is not working. All right, we'll try disk 4. And again, that's got some utility programs. I really enjoy that whoever had this computer before felt it necessary to put CP/M trademark version 2.2. So they had to let you know this is a trademark disk. Don't go copying it. Don't actually know where the delete key is on here. I guess I should have read the instructions better. Okay, I've used up all my luck. The magic smoke is coming out now. I'm going to pull the power on this. I'm glad I read up on that beforehand so I knew what part was blowing up and smoking. I think I would have been pretty terrified if that just happened randomly. So as with a lot of these old computer videos, sometimes they don't get done all in one sitting or even 1 week. For me, it'll potentially be a long time until I look at the thing again, but for you guys watching, it'll just be a jump cut and maybe a haircut. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a real Osborne video without the capacitors blowing up and the magic smoke coming out. That was a couple weeks ago. We've been to Open Sauce. We've been back here to the Twin Cities. I've had a haircut, and we are back with the Osborne. I have a few new parts and accessories to stick into here to hopefully make this thing a little bit more usable. First off, we have a recap kit, the new capacitors, so we'll be swapping these in. I have this thing, which is a Gotek floppy drive adapter. So this basically emulates a floppy drive and has a USB port on the front, so you can put just a regular old memory stick and you can hook this up into your old vintage computer, trick it into thinking it's a floppy drive, and boot disk images from it. That's a little bit tricky with the Osborne because it uses kind of a non-standard disk format. It also uses a non-standard disk interface, which is why I've also had to go on eBay and get a adapter from standard IDE to Osborne. And then if you hear some noise in the background, I'm also running the 3D printer, printing out an adapter for the drive bay so that we can install this guy into the Osborne. The last new thing that we have here is a battery-powered soldering iron. This is made by Isotip, which is a company fairly local to me. They're actually in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So this is not imported Amazon junk. This is actually made right here in the USA. And these guys contacted me and just offered me one kind of out of the blue. They didn't even want a review necessarily. They just said, hey, we'd like to have you try this out for your projects. Of course, that means we have to take this apart once again. This is something called BS. I think you have to major in this at business school before they let you run a corporation. There's our lovely smoked capacitor. I'm going to go ahead and replace some of the other ones in here as well, just because I have this open and I have the replacements on hand. We're going to go ahead and try the Isotip soldering iron. I've got the medium-sized tip in it. Alright, we got the remnants of that one out, and yeah, we actually did hear a pop when this went, and it's in several pieces. Alright, I think all our new capacitors are in, and I know Isotip said they didn't necessarily want a review, but this thing is great. It looks like it's the same vintage as the Osborne. This looks like it could have been built in the 80s, but yeah, simpler is better when it comes to these things, and this is definitely a really simple device, has basically one control, easy to pop the tips in and out, and it heats up almost instantly. So I think I'm going to start using this instead of my plug-in soldering iron, because this honestly heats up faster, much more convenient, and it has this little light on there. So thank you to Isotip for sending this. I will throw a link to their products down in the description. This is not a sponsored product review. They just sent me this thing, and this is the first time I've had a chance to use it. While we've got this opened up, I'm going to try dropping the A drive out of here, since that's one that had issues. Now, you remember I did try to put some lube in these before I took them apart, but it's possible that I could get this working again if I opened it up further and maybe cleaned the heads with some isopropyl alcohol or something. But I want to do that Gotek anyway, because it's going to be more convenient than using floppy drives, and I don't want to pay for actual floppy disks on eBay, so if I can just download the disk images, throw them on a flash drive, that's way more convenient. I'm definitely not going to throw away this drive, though. We're going to keep it around, save it for parts as usual. So my 3D print is done. It mostly came out okay, although there was a little sagging here. I forgot to support this opening. I'm going to have to clean this up a little bit. The person who did the 3D design said they had never actually tested it. They just did it to measurements and specifications they found online. I can't complain. I certainly can't design something like this in CAD. I'm just not that good at it. So we're going to have to make some of these screw holes a little bit bigger. We're going to have to do some trimming around the edges, and then I think we can replace our floppy drive with it. We have a 2 on this connector. We have a 2 over here, 34 over here, 34 over there. So I'm about 90% confident that this is the right way. It's also not a real Osborne video unless we try to run the thing naked with the cover off, just to see if we've got everything done properly before I put all that plastic back in place. On the plus side, it's working. The magic smoke has stayed inside, no terrible noises, no dense smoke coming out. On the minus side, I've been looking into the Gotek floppy adapter a little bit more, which naturally I didn't do any research on it before I bought it. There are apparently several versions of this with different firmware on them, and the firmware that you need for the Osborne is something called Flash Floppy, which I don't think this has. If I were to get that on there myself, I have to open the thing up, solder on some programming headers, get a special USB cable, program the thing's firmware myself. That sounds like a lot of work. So we might actually pull this Gotek out, buy one on eBay with Flash Floppy pre-installed. Alright, so we have the new and improved Gotek unit installed. Now I'm trying to figure out how to get disk images on there. There doesn't seem to be a really good step-by-step guide online, and all the files I'm finding are in really weird formats that supposedly need several intermediate steps to get into something that the Flash Floppy firmware will read. So this Gotek has the little OLED screen, and it tells us we have our Flash Floppy firmware. Can feed it a USB drive, and now we can use the little knob here to go through all of the image files on that flash drive, and then whatever image file is selected acts like disk A. So we've put the disk in drive A and we hit return, and there we go. We've loaded up CPM from the flash drive. I've got one working disk image and the other ones are not functioning properly. Now our B drive should still work the same as before, so if I put an actual disk in there, that works great. I can probably fit every piece of software ever written for CPM on a flash drive like this, so basically don't need to use the actual floppy drive anymore. Okay, we've got some new disk images, and these seem to be working. After screwing around for a while, I managed to find this HCX floppy emulator, which wouldn't download from the official hcx2001.com page, but I found it on some third-party media library. This will let me load Osborne TD0 files, which are in that weird teledisc format, and then output them as HFE files, which the Gotek adapter will read, so I can load those. Also let me open these IMD image files, convert those over to HFE. Richard Loxley has a really helpful blog about all this, and he mentions how there's a whole flow chart here of how to get things onto the Osborne. You have to get individual files into an IMG image, and then get them into an IMD image, and then get them into an HFE image or a TD0 image, and then you can send them over to the flash floppy through USB. I haven't even gotten some of these programs to work. Some of these are Windows programs, some of these are Linux programs, some of them are command line programs. I'm still fighting through this process to try to understand it. And it doesn't help that beyond the physical size and underlying technology of these disks, everything about them is a little weird and obscure compared to other disk technology from the 80s. The capacity is weird, the density is weird, the formatting is weird. So there are a ton of hoops to jump through to get a file that was originally on an Osborne disk onto the internet, onto a modern computer, and then back onto an Osborne. And if you screw up any one of those hoops along the way, it becomes unreadable. My Gotek screen is flipped upside down for some reason, but we are able to load some of those other disks. All right, we've got Adventure up. I still don't know what the graphics are like on this other than ASCII art, so I'm not sure how well some of these will work. Huh? That actually works decently well. Alright, we've got Space Invaders. I tried to go back to my main menu on the disk here, and I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure if this is part of the game or something's just gone haywire. Let's try Pac-Man. And this is very much ASCII art here. My screen also wants to jump around a little bit. And as usual, I have no idea how to get back out of this to the command line. I guess that's why the reset button is such a big prominent thing on the front here. When you're done with a program, you just mash that reset button. I'm also still not used to the delete key. There really isn't a backspace or delete key. There are these arrow keys, and sometimes they do things, sometimes they don't. I guess they didn't invent backspace until like 1984. Well, this seems to be Space Invaders, but with worse graphics. I'm trying this Planetfall game. This seems to be a space text adventure. Alright, I think we have Kermit. I didn't even have to compile it. Most people say you have to download hex files and compile it yourself, but somebody had already done that and shared their disk image, and it seems to be working. I'd like to get the Osborne talking to a modern system over a serial port, so I've pulled out my luggable-inspired CyberDeck. This is just a Raspberry Pi inside a custom case. Brought this out to OpenSauce in June of 2024. So we've got the luggable CyberDeck here hooked up over to the Osborne with a USB to serial cable. We've got the 9-pin to 25-pin adapter on the Osborne. I've been trying this a couple different ways. I tried a lap link cable. We tried the other serial port on here, which is also a USB to serial under the hood. We're still having some issues. I've got Kermit installed over here. I'm trying to run GTTY on the Linux box and connect to it with Kermit. I'm not getting anything back and forth. The closest I can get is if I connect with Kermit and run a screen on the USB device over on the Linux box. I can send text messages back and forth. I can type on one machine and have it show up on the other machine, but I'm not getting the Osborne to log in to the Linux box the way I want it to. If anyone out there knows, first off, can I get a Linux terminal login over here, log into this Linux box, and use this as a terminal, type in commands, get stuff back. I could maybe browse with the Lynx browser via the Linux box. That would be pretty cool on here. If anyone has ideas on that, please let me know, and I would especially appreciate a very simple step-by-step walkthrough guide that I can understand, because I am not an expert in any of this stuff. We're going to wrap this video up. It's dinner time for the cats, so they're just flying past me every 10 seconds, and you can hear the thunder of little cat feet upstairs. So sooner or later, if I don't feed them, one of these things is going to get knocked on the floor and broken. So I better quit while I'm ahead. Stay tuned for future Osborne updates. Check out my other videos for other weird vintage tech like Tandy 100 laptops and other old computers, and then you can see me build this thing kind of as a homage to the old luggables of the old days. Thanks again to everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.